7 days ago, Tom Fernelli was on this glorious network telling you that the Fighting Illini were not just going to win, they were going to win by 1,000,000 points. And while the million didn't quite cash, it was a dominant victory for Illinois, which dictated the terms of the game, and were able to get that victory, avenging a loss from 2 years ago and keeping them in the Big Ten title race. So, Tom, I'm going to start with you here. How does Brett Bielema put the pieces back together, switch the jerseys out of the Leatherheads, and be able to get this team ready to go play not only at that same level, but even higher as they head into Autzen Stadium for the big time game of the week this Saturday?
I mean, I don't know if he has to do a whole lot of work to get his team ready to face the number one team in the country. I think that kind of hypes up a locker room on its own. But I also think that this week's quite a bit of a different test than last week against Michigan was, because I just don't think Michigan's a very good football team, particularly in comparison to this Oregon monster that they're going to be facing. And you're going on the road. You're a 3-touchdown underdog for good reason, because we have seen Autzen Stadium. We saw Ohio State struggle there. And Illinois, as good as they have been and as many games as they have won, in recent weeks, there have been some, kind of concerns if you watch closely, particularly in the run defense. And I think that is the one aspect here that I'd be seriously concerned about if I'm the Illini, because in conference play, like I know Oregon got off to a very slow start offensively. They were dealing with injuries on their offensive line. But in conference play, they are pretty much top 3 in every single kind of important category that you would look at, except for, points per red zone trip. But a lot of that is because of a few red zone turnovers and a couple games from Dylan Gabriel. But overall, this is a very good offense. It's a very good defense. I would argue it's the best team Illinois has seen so far this season. And they did go on the road to face Penn State a few weeks ago, and we saw them struggle to move the ball and put points on the board in that game. And I think you're going to see a very similar situation here. But the difference was, while the Illinois defense was able to corral Penn State for the most part in that game, or at least force them to keep things on the ground, I don't know how effective they'll be in that aspect against Oregon at Autzen, because I think that this offense is a bit more dynamic. I think their offensive line is better, it's stronger, it's bigger. And even if Illinois' defensive line performed well against the Michigan offensive line, Oregon's is much better. And I just don't know if they're going to have that same kind of success. So this is a really difficult test for the Illini. Going on the road, I know they're feeling great, but we saw when they went on the road to face Penn State, they didn't look nearly as good as they did in the rest of their games. I have a feeling we'll see something similar. But then again, I never would have thought Illinois would be 6-1 at this point, so I can't rule anything out.
No, you can't. Clearly, Oregon is, they're the better team. That's why they're, 3-touchdown favorite. But I'm trying to look at ways that Illinois could compete in this game and potentially pull off an upset. I think it's got to start with the offense, figuring out ways to put up points on an Oregon defense. Like I don't envision a scenario where they turn this into a Big Ten bloodbath, and almost similar to the Penn State game on the road where they hold Penn State to 21. It's kind of ugly, and you just slow it down. I don't see them slowing down Oregon's offense, but I do think they could put up points on Oregon's defense, and I don't think they can do it running the football. I think they can do it with an offense which has a quarterback playing as good as anybody out there, and Luke Altmaier, and with 2 receivers who are dynamic playmakers, and Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin. These guys, they're clearly the focal point of their offense. But when I broke down some of this film last week before the Michigan game and watched what Barry Lunney was doing, he really does play to Luke Altmaier's strengths. Like, you've got a mobile quarterback who gets rid of the football pretty quickly. They give him some quick hitters. Like, you get some little play action pass, little bootlegs, nakeds, where you got a little tight end on a slide route, or you hit a wide receiver coming across on a shallow route, or a back out of the backfield. It's just the ball's out of his hand. That can be very frustrating for a team like Oregon, who's going to get on the other side of the line of scrimmage, right? Their defensive line has been really good, but that starts to break their back when you can keep getting rid of the football and you don't capitalize on those sacks. So to me, that's where Illinois can make this a ball game. If they can score on Oregon's defense, get into a little bit of a shootout. Like, I don't think you want to see what happened against Purdue, but a game in the 30s potentially. I think that bodes really well for Illinois to get in one of those type of battles. Now, I think it's easy to sit here and say, yeah, go ahead and get in the shootout and score on that defense in their own backyard. But I think that's the way I would look for them to have some success.
I think Tom's point is really good. If you look at the scoreboard from the Penn State Illinois game, it was close. If you look at like the success rate differential, it was not. Like Penn State was running successful plays way more often than Illinois was. But the key is they tackled those successful plays. Those successful plays, they were just that, successful, but they weren't explosives. They weren't home runs. They made Penn State get in the red zone. They were able to frustrate them. That's something Ohio State failed to do against Oregon, that if Illinois wants to have any shot in this game, they have got to try to deny the explosive play and see if they can get lucky, kind of spin that little red zone roulette wheel, right, that we like to talk about on this show all that much. And to Danny's point, I mean, what did Ohio State throw for? Like 85%, 80%, like 28 of 35-ish? Mm-hmm. And then also Michigan State, a team that does not complete a high percentage of passes, they were like 68 against Oregon. So Oregon has allowed a lot of completions this year. Altmaier getting the ball out of his hands. So if you can just continue to be exceptionally good at tackling, even if you're getting pushed around a little bit, just get guys on the ground. Maybe you have a day in the red zone, you get lucky, get some turnovers, maybe you block a field goal or something, and you find a way to win this thing.
But doesn't this feel like we're dealing with an Oregon offense that is as good as it's been all year? You know, one of the big storylines that we had coming out of the Ohio State game was how Evan Stewart, you know, had really emerged, how he answered the call, especially with the way that wide receiver room had gone. You know, no Bryant Jr., the Holden gets ejected. And in that Purdue game, you know, which, you know, obviously we were all just dialed into the action in Durham. We don't need to discuss that. But if you go to that Purdue game, when I rewatched it, Evan Stewart, 4 targets, 4 catches, 96 yards. Tez Johnson, who's been just like rock solid all season, targeted 7 times, caught all 7 of those with 66 yards and a touchdown. But it feels like this is Oregon finally building to this point. Maybe not a surprise given transfer quarterback, you know, and everything that it needed to take with the offensive line. But I think that to me, if I'm Illinois, you know, if I'm Aaron Henry, I'm really concerned that Dillon Gabriel and these wide receivers are totally in sync right now.
Anytime a defensive coordinator plays Evan Stewart, they're going to be concerned because the guy is extremely explosive. But most of the time, in this guy's career, it actually works out for him just fine, right? Like Evan Stewart generally does not show up in his career like he did against Ohio State. If he is going to show up and play consistently, give good effort, good intensity, good focus on a week-to-week basis, then Oregon is really, really scary. But like, if you're Illinois, you're like, okay, if he's going to play like that, we're kind of just screwed, guys. We can't cover that guy. Ohio State couldn't cover that version of that guy. But what happens if he doesn't show up? We've seen that more times this year than not. So it's kind of on Evan Stewart to actually show up and show that Ohio State game is really who he's going to be on a week-to-week basis. If you're going to tell me that he's going to be that guy this week, we could probably just go to the next game because Illinois is not going to beat Oregon if Evan Stewart shows up and has an Ohio State-type performance. I'm sorry.
I will say this. Illinois has a couple ball hawks in the secondary in the Scott brothers. I know they're not brothers, but Xavier and Miles Scott with 5 interceptions between them. And Dillon Gabriel, as good as he's been playing, and it's crazy to say that a guy has 15 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, but he's been a little bit more careless with the football, especially the last 4 games. Like he was clean in the first 3 games versus kind of nobody. He had the 2 picks against Michigan State. He had a pick against Purdue this past weekend. So like that's your opportunity as well to maybe steal some points, steal a possession, get good field position, maybe take advantage of that. So I think that might be something to keep an eye on. Again, I think you've got to try to find ways to pick your poison, to get aggressive, maybe force an errant throw here or there, but it does get dangerous with the amount of weapons that they've got. And they've been running the ball a little bit better behind an offensive line, which really all season long has been getting better and better and better up to this point. The other thing I wanted to ask you guys, I don't know if Bud knows this because usually the injury expert for us, Jordan Burch, who was their best defensive player, missed. You remember he was out for the Ohio State game and it was a practice injury. I was looking all over the place. It looks like Dan Lanning is very vague, saying it's just, you know, it's we're doing what's best for the player. I don't know if we see him. I don't know if it matters in this game, but it is something to keep an eye on for Oregon's, you know, national championship hope, Big Ten title hopes to keep an eye on, because the less you hear of it, the more concerned I get. Like, why aren't we talking about his return?
Yeah, the completely unverified Twitter chatter was that he was like carted off of practice. So I don't know how long that lasts, if that's actually a real thing. I think Oregon's practices are closed, but yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen anything that he's going to play this weekend. I'll say that.
I think that regardless of whether Birch plays or not. I mean, obviously it's a big deal for Oregon, but I think that if you just look at this matchup as far as a timing aspect, I think there's so much more to this matchup going in Oregon's direction in that standpoint because, Illinois, clearly they had that huge game last week at home, 100-year anniversary. They were really building up to it all season. They get the win. Now they're going on the road, whereas Oregon played Purdue on Friday night. But matchup-wise, Purdue plays a lot of man defense, like more than anybody in the country. And their head coach, Ryan Walters, was Illinois' defensive coordinator. Illinois still runs a defense under Aaron Henry that is very similar to what they had run under Ryan Walters. They don't run nearly as much man as Purdue does, but they still run it 50% of the time, which is the third highest rate in the country. So Dillon Gabriel last Friday pretty much got a sneak peek into what he's more likely to see this weekend against Illinois and how to take advantage of it. And if you look at his numbers on the season, while he hasn't seen a ton of man compared to zone, when he has seen it, he's torn it apart. He's 30 for 40, averaging over 10 yards per attempt with 7 touchdowns and only 1 interception. So it will be interesting to see if Illinois changes things up a little bit to try to confuse him because as both Bud and Danny touched on earlier, Illinois is going to need to force the ball, some turnovers if they want to give themselves a shot to win this game. And I think that's the only way Oregon can truly be in danger is if Dillon Gabriel does make mistakes and does make a few passes that he regrets and turns the ball over because talent-wise, Oregon's clearly the better team. They are at home. This is a game where they should win unless they help Illinois beat them.
All right, Tom. What do we think? It's a lean or a lock or a prediction. The floor is yours.
I think this is a very tough test. I think if you look at Oregon, obviously beating Ohio State the last time out, they're number 1 in the country. They're the favorite to win the Big Ten right now, and all for good reason. But the Illini are going to go to Autzen Stadium on Saturday afternoon and bring the best effort they've brought so far this year, and they are going to shock the world, Chip. Illini by 1 billion.
Ah! I'm ready to strap on a leather helmet and just run through a wall. Thank you, Tom. It's exactly what we needed.